Chapter 1. The Ancient Village and the Strange Well. The small village lay hidden deep in a remote valley, surrounded by dark, ancient forests and towering mountains. The only dirt road leading into the village was winding, rocky, and moss-covered, making it almost impossible for outsiders to reach. Life here drifted quietly, cut off from the outside world. At the center of the village stood an ancient well. No one knew exactly how long it had existed, even the oldest elders, with hair as white as snow, could not remember. The well was built entirely of moss-covered green stone blocks, stacked tightly together. Its mouth was sealed by a massive stone lid, so heavy that it would take 3 or 4 strong men to move it. What terrified people most were the strange carvings etched around the rim of the stone. They weren't letters anyone could read, but twisted symbols, like hundreds of unblinking eyes staring back at those who dared approach. Children were forbidden to go near, and adults avoided it, never looking at it for too long. It was said the well was not for drawing water. It had been sealed for generations, forbidden to be disturbed. By day, it was silent, like an inanimate object, but at night, especially when the moon hid, the wind passing over it seemed to carry strange sounds. Sometimes it was faint clattering, as if chains were rattling below. Other times, whispers rose from the depths, too soft to understand. A few old villagers claimed the well was tied to terrible events from long ago. They never told the whole story, but their eyes carried such dread that no one dared press them further. On stormy nights, when the village was silent and rain drummed against mossy rooftops, a sound would sometimes echo from the well. Knock, 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 as if someone, or something, was tapping from beneath, begging to be let out. Chapter 2. The Legend of Blood and Souls. The well was rarely spoken of, but on cold winter nights, when children begged their grandparents for stories, one tale always returned: the legend of the Blood Well. Long ago, this land had been a battlefield. Invading armies swept through, slaughtering the villagers. The ground was soaked with blood, corpses piled high. The villagers dug a massive pit to bury the dead. Later, that pit was walled with stone and sealed. It became the well. Victims were thrown in alive, chained, silenced. Blood, bones, and curses seeped into the earth. Elders swore that on full moon nights, if one dared peer through the cracks of the stone lid, the water inside would rise red as fresh blood, bubbling with white froth and stinking of rot. Some who pressed their ears to the well heard muffled sobs, or cries that did not belong to the wind. They warned that anyone foolish enough to drink from it would be cursed. At first, the cursed dreamt of strange figures: a long-haired woman, a wounded child, a soldier in torn armor. Each night the visions grew clearer, until the figures whispered their names. The victims either went mad, clawing their own flesh, or died mysteriously, their bodies contorted in terror. An old blind woman once muttered, "That well is no source of water. It is the mouth of demons, a gate that binds the damned. Break its seal, and the darkness will be unleashed." From then on, the well became the village's silent nightmare. Children were threatened with being thrown into the well if they misbehaved. Adults walked quickly past, heads bowed, yet the more it was feared, the more the whispers grew, as though something down below was waiting, always waiting. Chapter 3. The Curious Youths. Among the villagers were 4 young men: Kai, Lam, Hung, and Tai. Bold and reckless, they scoffed at the legends. Over rice wine, they laughed at the elders' warnings, calling them foolish tales to scare children. One moonlit night, with drink burning in their blood, Kai leapt up, pointing toward the ancient well. "Enough of these stories. I'll prove it's all lies. Who dares come with me and lift that stone lid? Let's see what's really inside." His friends hesitated, but pride and drink urged them on. They carried torches to the well, its mossy rim glowing eerily in the pale moonlight. The carvings on the stone seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering firelight. Hung whispered nervously, "Let's stop. Do you hear that? There's something moving down there." Indeed, faint clinking rose from the well, like nails scraping stone. But Kai laughed, swaggering forward, shoving against the massive lid. The others reluctantly helped, straining with all their strength. The stone groaned, scraping horribly. Moss crumbled away. A freezing gust burst forth from the widening crack, nearly snuffing their torches. The stench was overwhelming, rotten, metallic, suffocating. Finally, the lid slid aside. The four peered down. The moonlight revealed only black water, thick and still, rippling as if something had just disturbed it. Then came a sound, a long, sorrowful sigh, rising from the depths. The boys froze. Kai forced a grin, though his face was pale. "It's just the wind, don't be cowards." But a droplet splashed upward, striking Lamb's cheek. He wiped it away, and stared in horror. His fingers were smeared red. "That's not water," he whispered. "It's blood." The night wind rose sharply, carrying with it the fetid breath of the grave. From the darkness below came the steady, dreadful sound of chains clattering, growing louder, closer, as if something was climbing upward. Chapter 4. Sounds from the well. Since that night, the village was never the same. Strange noises haunted the dark. At midnight, while the village slept, the well groaned and whispered. Sometimes there was clattering, like chains dragging across stone. Other times, the sound of heavy breathing, or pitiful moans rising faintly. Children woke screaming, clutching their throats, claiming a cold, wet hand had tried to drag them away in their dreams. Elders sat awake, swearing they saw shifting shadows hovering near the well at dawn. Old Lady Wa, whose hut was nearest the well, stumbled to a neighbor one evening. Trembling, she swore she heard footsteps circling the well, slapping. Wet, deliberate, but when her son checked, the only thing he found was the tilted stone lid, and from the black crack rose a chill reek like a corpse rotting in water. More and more villagers claimed to see things. A pale face beneath the surface, long strands of dripping hair brushing the stone rim, or the faint sound of someone knocking from below. Knock, knock, knock. The sound grew nightly, regular as a drumbeat, and each knock seemed to echo inside their heads, drawing them closer. Lamb, one of the four who had opened the well, began to lose sleep. He dreamt of being dragged downward, hearing the knocking inside his skull. A whisper haunted him. "Come down, join us." One dawn, his mother found his shoes caked in wet mud, though he swore he hadn't left the house. The well was no longer just an old stone relic. It had become a living thing, breathing, whispering, calling. Chapter 5. The First Death. It began with Kai. At first, he seemed normal, though distracted, his gaze always drifting toward the well. He often froze mid-conversation, as if listening to something only he could hear. At night, his family found him standing in the doorway, murmuring softly, "I hear you. I'll come. I'll join you soon." One morning, his body was found sprawled at the edge of a rice field. His clothes were soaked, smeared with mud. His face was contorted in terror, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. But the most horrifying detail was his neck, bruised deep, as if clamped by a massive hand. The villagers whispered, "It wasn't human." The well reached up and took him. At the funeral, the village priest trembled, unable to close the boy's eyes. He muttered under his breath, "This was no natural death. The well has opened its mouth." That night, dogs howled endlessly, all facing the well, and each time they howled, the sound from below answered, a mocking echo, like laughter rising from the deep. Kai's death was the first, and with it, the villagers knew the curse of the blood well had truly begun. Chapter 6. The Water Changes. After Kai's funeral, the atmosphere in the village grew heavy with dread. Those living closest to the well began to notice disturbing changes in its water. One morning, Old Lady Wa, desperate for water, lowered her bucket into the well. When she hauled it up, she nearly dropped it in shock. The water inside was no longer clear, it was murky, thick, as though mixed with sludge. Floating atop were long, black strands. When she looked closer, her blood ran cold. They were strands of human hair, wet and clumped together. She shrieked, flinging the bucket aside, but the hair clung to her fingers. Slimy and reeking, she stumbled home, sobbing and trembling, swearing she would never touch the well again. Others who dared peek into the depths swore the water was no longer black, but dark red. Sometimes bubbles rose to the surface, releasing a fetid stench that made their stomachs heave. Worse, those who touched the water met terrible fates. A young man named Ben, mocking the rumors, scooped some to wash his face. Within days, he changed. First, sleepless nights. Then he began clawing at his own skin, gouging bloody furrows in his face, laughing madly as though possessed. One night, he vanished. In the morning, Villagers found only a trail of wet footprints, leading straight to the well. Soon after, the well erupted. On the night of the full moon, the water surged, flooding the square. But it was not water, it was blood. Thick, stinking, crimson blood poured over the stones, soaking the earth, filling the air with the sweet, suffocating stench of death. In the reflection of the moon, villagers saw pale faces swirling in the current, faces of the drowned, the forgotten, the sacrificed, smiling grotesquely before sinking back into the depths. The whispers grew louder that night. "Return our lives. Give us back our blood." From then on, no one doubted. The well was no longer just a relic. It was a mouth, and it was hungry. Chapter 7. Eyes beneath the water. After the flood of blood, no one dared approach the well. Yet one dawn, old man Nam insisted he must see it with his own eyes. Against his family's pleas, he hobbled out, muttering, "If I don't see it myself, I'll never die in peace." He peered into the well. At first, only still black water, then ripples, and from the depths, a pair of eyes stared back, red, glowing, unblinking. They weren't his reflection, they belonged to something below. His heart froze. He staggered back, but the eyes followed, burning into his soul. In his head, a voice whispered, chilling and hollow, "Come down, we are waiting." Nam screamed, dropped his cane, and fled. He collapsed near the bamboo grove, unconscious. When he woke, his mind was broken. From then on, he muttered one phrase over and over, eyes wide in terror. "They're climbing up, climbing, climbing." The tale spread quickly. Even in daylight, villagers avoided the well entirely. Yet the nights grew worse. People heard scratching along the stone, like nails clawing their way upward. On stormy nights, some swore they saw long, wet hair creeping over the rim before vanishing. The well was no longer silent. It had become an eye that stared back, a mouth that breathed, a hand reaching up, and everyone knew. Sooner or later, it would climb all the way out. Chapter 8. The Disappearances. Fear deepened when people began vanishing. The first was little Koa, an 8-year-old boy. His mother woke one morning to find his bed empty, the door ajar, and muddy footprints leading out into the night. They ended at the well. The villagers searched forests, fields, and rivers, but the boy was gone, swallowed whole. Days later, Widow La disappeared. Neighbors swore they heard her humming a lullaby though she lived alone. When they checked, her house was empty, food still cooking, the bed soaked with strands of wet hair. Soon after, it was Tan, the skeptic. His shirt was found draped across the well's rim, soaked in slime, but his body was never seen again. Each night, children wept, saying voices whispered their names from outside the window. "Come out, come play with us." Panic spread like plague. People locked themselves in, but the vanishings continued. Every midnight, the knocking returned, steady, mocking. Knock, knock, knock. And with each disappearance, villagers began to wonder in terror. When will it be my turn? Chapter 9. The Ancient Inscriptions. Desperate, the villagers summoned a traveling exorcist, a frail old man with piercing eyes and a staff of black wood. He circled the well, muttering incantations, his gnarled hand brushing the carvings around the stone rim. Finally, he slammed his staff into the earth and barked, "Fools, this is no well. It is a gate to the underworld. Your ancestors knew this. That's why they sealed it with blood-carved charms. But you, fools, you broke the chains." The crowd murmured in fear. The old man's eyes narrowed. These symbols are not decorations. They are ancient talismans, written in blood mixed with bone ash. They were meant to bind the souls within. Break them, and nothing holds the darkness back. "Can it be sealed again?" the village head asked, voice trembling. The exorcist hesitated, then nodded grimly. "It can, but the ritual demands sacrifice. Blood for blood. A willing soul must be given, or the gate will never close." The villagers recoiled, silent in horror. No one dared volunteer. That night, the old man began his preparations anyway. He drew circles of ash around the well, planted 4 black candles at the cardinal points, and placed old talisman papers, faded with age, on the rim. Smoke swirled into strange shapes, and the villagers watched with wide eyes, praying the old man's power could hold back the curse. But from the mouth of the well, cold air wafted upward, reeking of decay. It breathed like a monster ready to be set free. Chapter 10. The Failed Ritual. That night, the entire village gathered in silence. The black candles flickered, their weak flames trembling. The exorcist sat cross-legged at the rim, sword of peachwood in hand, chanting in the ancient tongue. At first, nothing. Then the well roared. The water boiled violently, blood surging, foam spraying. The villagers screamed, but the old man snapped. Do not move. If you break the ritual, you will all die. The talismans glowed faintly red. The carvings around the rim burned like fiery eyes. The old man slashed his palm, dripping blood into the well, shouting, "Rest, cursed souls, return to the abyss where you belong." But suddenly, the eastern candle extinguished. A woman nearby shrieked, her throat squeezed by invisible hands. The red binding cord snapped like string. The other candles burst, plunging the circle into darkness. A torrent of black smoke erupted from the well, coiling upward, twisting into monstrous shapes. The air filled with screams, laughter, and cries all at once. The villagers clutched their heads, hearing their own names whispered in 1,000 voices. The old man staggered, eyes rolling white. Blood gushed from his mouth as he rasped, "Too late, it is free." Then he collapsed, lifeless. The villagers stood frozen. From the depths, the knocking resumed, louder, sharper, like a death drum. Knock, knock, knock. The seal was broken, and the nightmare had only just begun. Chapter 11. The village in fear. After the failed ritual, the village descended into terror. No one dared speak above a whisper, as if afraid the voices from below would hear. The exorcist's body was buried hastily in the bamboo grove, but his corpse terrified the villagers most. His eyes remained wide open, bloodshot, staring into some horror no one else could see. Though his face was covered with white cloth, by morning the cloth was soaked through, crimson as though bleeding from the eyes themselves. That night, every dog in the village died. Their bodies lay scattered, throats torn open, eyes bulging in terror. The villagers whispered that the dogs had seen what humans could not, and had been silenced. Families fled in desperation, but those who left never made it far. By dawn, their bodies were found at the forest's edge, skin purple, mouths gaping as if strangled. Each corpse was stuffed with dripping moss and slime from the well. The survivors locked themselves indoors. Children sobbed that someone was watching them through the windows. When fathers rushed out to chase the intruder, they found only muddy footprints, leading straight to the well. In his home, the old village head, Lou, sat drinking heavily before the ancestral altar, his eyes red, muttering, "We hid it too long. The sins of our fathers cannot be buried anymore." The whole village was suffocating in dread. No one knew who would be taken next. They only knew one thing for certain. Ever since the lid was moved, their home was no longer a village. It was hell. Chapter 12. The Call from the Well. Among those suffering was Ha, Kai's younger sister, a girl of 16. After her brother's death, she grew pale and distant, often staring blankly toward the well. At night she whispered in her sleep, "Brother, you're calling me? I hear you." At first, her family thought it was grief, but then they, too, heard it. A voice rising from the well at night. Kai's voice, gentle, familiar, calling, "Ha, come to me? I'm waiting below." Ha trembled, eyes filling with tears. She began to wander at night, walking toward the well in a trance, lips parted in a faint smile. Her mother once found her outside, halfway across the yard, rope still tied to her waist. Without that rope, she would have stepped straight into the darkness. Her health withered, her eyes sank deep, her skin grew pale, her lips bled from biting. "Awake," she muttered. "It's not cold down there. There are so many of them. They're waiting for me." One stormy night, lightning split the sky. The family awoke to find Ha's rope cut clean, as though by an invisible blade. The door swung open. Through the rain, they saw her figure moving slowly toward the well, clothes drenched, hair plastered to her face. From the darkness came Kai's voice again, soft but dreadful. "Ha, come down with me." It was no longer just a curse. The well had learned to speak in voices of the dead, luring the living into its mouth. Chapter 13. The village head's confession. Unable to bear the terror, the villagers confronted Lou, the old headman. They gathered at his house, demanding answers. The old man sat trembling, pouring cup after cup of rice wine. Finally, with a hoarse laugh, he spoke. "You want the truth? Fine. But know this, the guilt belongs to all of us. Not just me." The villagers fell silent. That well was never a well. It was a pit to bury the living. Our ancestors believed that sacrifice was the only way to protect the village. Prisoners, traitors, even children, were bound and thrown alive into the hole. Their blood carved the talismans. Their souls sealed it. That's why it was covered. Why it was forbidden. And now, you've broken it open. Gasps rose. Some wept. Others shook in denial. Lou slammed his fist on the table, eyes blazing red. "Do you not hear them? Every night they call me by name. They want their blood back. They want every drop repaid." Chaos erupted. People screamed, cursed, sobbed, but no one could deny it anymore. The curse of the well was not born of demons. It was the vengeance of countless souls, slaughtered and buried by their own forebears. And now, the debt was due. Chapter 14. The Hand in the Night. That night, a storm lashed the village. Rain poured in torrents. Thunder cracked. Lightning illuminated the ancient well. From within came the sound of furious splashing, as though something massive stirred below. Then the pounding began. Thud, 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 chains or fists hammering against stone. In a flash of lightning, villagers screamed. A gigantic pale hand, bloated like a drowned corpse, emerged from the depths. Its long, blackened nails screeched against the stone, clawing for purchase. Then another hand, and another. Soon, dozens of hands gripped the rim, scratching, tearing, dragging. Those who saw fled in terror, crying, "They're climbing up. The dead are climbing out." Flames of torches flickered, casting grotesque shadows. Faces began to appear, half-formed and dripping wet, staring upward with empty eyes. Some grinned wide with jagged, blood-stained teeth. The air filled with screams and wails. Mingling with the storm, the ground shook as the voices rose, chanting in unison, "Give us back our lives, give them back." Blood surged over the rim, flowing into the streets. The pale hands reached further, grasping, waving blindly. The village knew. The seal was shattered. The dead were no longer content to stay below. Chapter 15. The Crimson Flood. As the storm raged, the well erupted again. With a deafening roar, blood gushed upward, not water. Thick, hot, metallic. It poured over the rim, spilling into the square. Within minutes, the earth was a swamp of red. It seeped through alleys, into yards, staining walls and doors. Families barricaded themselves, but the crimson tide crept under thresholds, filling homes with the reek of death. Floating in the flood were shapes, faces, pale, swollen, with eyes rolled white and mouths agape. They turned slowly in the current, children and elders alike, whispering faintly, "We are not at rest, return our blood." Some villagers tried to flee, wading through the tide, but hands reached up from beneath, icy and relentless, clutching their legs, dragging them under. Their screams ended in choking gurgles as they vanished into the red depths. All night, the water rose, torches sputtered, flames drowned. The whispers grew louder, until it seemed the entire village was surrounded by voices calling their names. By dawn, the flood subsided, but the village was forever changed. The air was thick with the stench of blood. Walls were stained, and in the silence that followed, every survivor knew the well had become a river of death, and it would not stop until it had claimed them all. Chapter 16. The Return of the Dead. After the Crimson Flood, silence hung heavy over the ruined village. But soon, something more horrifying than death began. At dawn, farmers checking their fields froze in terror. A figure walked slowly along the dike. It was Ton, the man who had vanished days before. His shirt had been found draped across the well, but he himself was gone. Yet now, here he was. The farmers approached, but as they drew near, they recoiled. Ton's skin was pale, bloated like a drowned corpse. His eyes were milky white, lifeless. Water dripped steadily from his clothes, heavy with moss. His lips parted, and from his throat came a hollow sound. Knock, knock, knock. It was not his voice. It was the voice of the well. Soon after, Widow La returned. She wandered aimlessly around the well, hair plastered to her face, skin gray, lips muttering, "Give it back, give it back." Then came the worst, little Koa, the first to disappear. At dusk, Villagers heard a lullaby floating through the air. When they opened their doors, they saw the boy standing in the street. His eyes were hollow pits. His mouth stretched in a grotesque grin, blood trickling from the corners. In a thin, childlike voice, he called, "Mother, I've come home." The mother collapsed screaming. From then on, the village was haunted by the returned. They wandered the streets at night, dripping wet, whispering broken words. Children, elders, the vanished, all came back, but not as they once were. They were puppets, hollow shells, animated by the will of the well. And when the moon was full, they gathered around the well, standing in silence, their lifeless eyes turning toward the homes where the living cowered inside. The dead had returned, and they wanted company. Chapter 17. The Night of Horror. That night, the sky turned black, no stars, no moon, only swirling storm clouds. At midnight, the ground trembled, crockery rattled, roofs shook. From the well came a booming roar, water churning, stones cracking. Then, with a surge, black smoke burst forth, twisting into shapes that slithered across the village. The smoke solidified into figures, shadows with arms too long, fingers hooked like claws. They flew through walls, through doors, seizing villagers. Wherever they passed, people collapsed, eyes rolled back, bodies limp, as though their souls had been torn out. Worse still, within each shadow the villagers recognized familiar faces: Kai, Widow Lila, Little Koa, all distorted, screaming, laughing, weeping at once. The sky darkened as more shadows poured out. Shrieking, the entire village became a madhouse of sound, laughter, sobs, screams, whispers, all hammering into the mind until people clawed at their ears in vain. From the depths of the well came cracking sounds, chains snapping, stones splitting. The ground shook as though something enormous stirred below. Then, eyes, two gigantic, blazing red eyes opened in the darkness of the pit, burning like coals. A voice rumbled, shaking the earth. "Enough, now it is your turn to come down forever." The villagers screamed, but the shadows closed in. The flood rose again, hands reaching up, pulling them into the red depths. That night became legend, the night of horror, the night the well truly opened its mouth. Chapter 18. The Descent. Amid the chaos, four remained determined to face the horror: Lam, Tai, Hung, and Lan, Lam's cousin, whose father had been claimed by the well. They gathered ropes, torches, knives, and the few faded talismans left by the dead exorcist. Their plan was madness: to descend into the well itself, to confront what lay beneath. The stone lid was gone, the rim cracked wide. Peering down, they saw only swirling darkness and faint ripples of red. The stench was suffocating. Lam tightened the rope around his waist. If not now, then never. One by one, they descended. The walls were slick with moss. But worse, scratches marred the stone, gouged deep, like countless hands had clawed in desperation, trying to climb out. At last, their feet touched bottom, but instead of solid ground, they found themselves in a vast cavern. Walls glistening wet, air thick with rot, chains dangled from the walls, and in them hung skeletons, hundreds, some still with scraps of flesh clinging to bone. Their empty eye sockets glowed faintly. Following the intruders, Lan raised her torch, and the light revealed heaps of corpses piled in the muck, their hands outstretched, as if still begging to escape. Then came a laugh, deep and mocking, reverberating through the cavern. "At last, you've come down to us." Chapter 19. Hell beneath the earth. They pressed forward, torches shaking. The cavern was endless, littered with bones and chains. Whispers filled the air. "We were slaughtered, we were buried alive, we were forgotten." Suddenly, the skeletons on the walls moved. Fingers twitched, jaws gnashed, eye sockets glowed red. One by one, they turned their heads toward the four intruders. From the muck below, corpses rose, bloated, dripping, hair hanging in clumps, eyes wide and white. They staggered forward, arms outstretched, chains dragging. The sound of iron scraping stone filled the air as the dead shuffled closer, chanting in unison, "Blood for blood, life for life." Lan shrieked, swinging her torch wildly, but the light only revealed more horrors. The ground was not soil at all, but layers of flesh and bones, a sea of corpses writhing beneath their feet. Faces stared up at them, grinning through torn lips. The cavern was no longer just a pit. It was hell itself, the underworld their ancestors had created. And now, the damned demanded repayment. Chapter 20. The open ending. The four stood surrounded. Corpses lurched closer. Shadows whispered. Chains rattled. Land's torch sputtered, dimming. In the flickering light, they saw familiar faces among the dead. Kai, Tan, Widow Lila, Little Koa, all staring, all smiling. Then the torch went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. From the depths, something massive stirred. Chains snapped, stones cracked. Two enormous red eyes opened, burning like suns in the abyss. A voice boomed, "Your time has come, join us, forever." Screams echoed, then silence. Ellipsis. The next morning, the village was deserted. Houses stood open, belongings untouched. But no voices, no footsteps. Only the well remained, its lid gone, its mouth yawning wide. Travelers who later passed the ruins claimed they heard sounds rising from the pit. Sometimes laughter, sometimes sobbing, sometimes whispers calling their names. The village vanished from maps. The land around it grew barren. Birds avoided it. At night, those who strayed too close swore they heard it, the steady, patient knocking from deep underground. Knock, knock, knock. The well had not closed. It was waiting, always waiting.